Hey, my name is Scott Payne, and that is Lee Lambert. He's one of the founders of the PMP exam. Every single week, I interview Lee, and I have him explain the most complicated PMP topics and to give you practical advice that can build your project management career. So let's get into this. All right, Lee, we're going to jump into it. Today, we're going to talk about how to succeed as a project management introvert in a world that kind of demands that you be an extrovert. Kind of an interesting topic. What are your thoughts right off the bat? First of all, before we get into it, are you an extrovert or an introvert right off the bat?
Well, I'm both.
Okay.
I'm both. And that's kind of what I want to talk about.
All right, hit it away. Go for it.
Yeah, technically speaking, everyone who knows me outside of the working world would tell you in a heartbeat that I'm an introvert.
Okay.
And the fact that I don't mix with people and family gatherings, I sit in the corner. If somebody wants to say hello, they better come over and tell me because I'm not coming to them. So it's true. I'm definitely. But what I found early on, here's the way I discovered it. I decided early on I wanted to do what I do, and teaching was really kind of in the back of my mind. And I got thinking that, this is going to be a real problem because teaching to an empty room is not going to work. And that's what I would feel most comfortable with. So back in about 73, when I took on an instruction role for earned value for General Electric, I decided that if I'm going to be successful, I can't do it as an introvert. So I have to modify my behavior to make it appear that I'm an extrovert. And I'm really damn good at it.
I would say so. You'd have me convinced.
I have people I tell them in my classes, when I'm in class, I'm an animal. I'm going 9 miles an hour. But when that class is over, don't come up and ask me to go to dinner with you because I ain't going. I'm going home and sitting by myself in the corner somewhere. So I think everybody, this is a lesson. It's not new by any means, but it's a lesson that I think people need to stop and first of all decide what do you want to be when you grow up, and then second of all, you got to decide, does that fit with your style? Does your style support where you want to be? And that was a no-brainer for me. It just wasn't going to work. So I had to make the changes. Now, we've got a lot of instruments out there, the personal profile system, the MBTI, lots of instruments that will determine what your makeup is, so to speak. But what I discovered early on is all that those instruments do is confirm what I already know. You know yourself better than anyone else. And so what I use those tools for was to confirm that I'm thinking I'm right. I've picked myself out and I define myself accurately. Now, if you take one of those instruments and you get an answer that's not consistent with your self-perception, then you may have a problem. You may need to face up to that, because I think what happens is that we perceive ourselves in a certain way, and if that's inconsistent with the way the rest of the world perceives you, you're going to have a problem. So I started working on that in 73 and really never stopped. I have in my classes, I don't teach anymore because I'm too lazy, but in my classes, I'd get 40, 50 people in a class, and this suckers just kept coming back. It didn't matter what topic I threw out there, filled up. Because they love me. We call them groupies. Aaron, my daughter who runs my business, we call them groupies. It didn't matter what the hell you were teaching; they show up. And so, when my wife passed away, I got I must have gotten hundreds of messages from people, especially in DC. That was where my focus was generally. Just groupies. People. I knew their names. I knew their families. I knew everything about. That's the other thing you got to do. If you're going to be an extrovert and be successful in the business that we're in, you have to really be interested in people. You have to. So what I would do is I would go to my class about an hour early. And then when people started showing up, I'd spend time getting to know them. Are you married? You got kids? You got animals? You got whatever. I'm creating a perception that I give a damn. And all of a sudden they damn, that Lee is just unbelievable. How would you, oh, he's an extrovert, no doubt about that. Well, that's because they haven't gone home with me. That's why.
Yeah.
And I think any job in project management, this is a critical issue because you're having to communicate with people who are going to perceive you in one way when in fact that may not be your style at all. And the problem is that you got two ends of this bookshelf. You got your particular style, and then you got the style of the person to whom you're speaking. If you can't read their style, if you can't adjust your style to meet the most effective way to deal with them, then you won't make it in project management. I guarantee you, unless or you'll have a reputation that's not that pleasant.
Right.
So what I used to tell my daughter's an attorney, my older daughter's an attorney, and she's a very bullheaded. I don't know where she got it, not from me for sure. But she just, she just thinks she knows the answers to questions that ain't been asked yet. And I used to talk to her all the time about you gotta modify your style. I mean, attorneys, you gotta have a little bit of a personality. I mean, I know attorneys don't generally, but you gotta have a little bit of personality. And so what I told her was, and I got this from Ken Blanchard, the 1 Minute Manager. And one of his books, and he had 1 minute everything by the time he got done. But when I looked at one of these books, it said, you don't get to be who you want to be. You have to be who you need to be successful.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I practiced in the project management world. And that's why I always got along with everybody. I mean, I didn't have anybody except for one guy at my last job. We had a little conflict, but generally speaking, I adjusted my style to be effective with whom I was working. And you could follow me around in a day, and you'd see that I switched hats 3, 4, 5 times in a day. You go, wait a minute, that's not the way he was acting a minute ago. Well, that's a minute ago wasn't what I'm doing now. And I think if you can go in and do a little study, do a little self-study, again, take personal profile system, DISC. That's a poor man's Myers-Briggs is what it amounts to.
Right.
And I don't really put a lot of stock in it. It's too detailed. The Myers-Briggs, the complexity of Myers-Briggs is more than I wanted to deal with. And back when I was teaching at IBM, they said, you got to be MBTI certified to teach this. Well, hell, I've been teaching it for years. But I'm not going to get certified. I can do this in my sleep. No, IBM rule, got to be MBTI. So I bailed on that assignment. But any of those tools that you use, those self-assessment tools, here's the problem with when you use them. You got to believe them. The answers they give you are not biased by some outside source. They're based on how you responded. And so you got to take those into account. I ran into cases where in my leadership class I use personal profile system, but I like it. And there'd be people that go, well, wait a minute, this is not me. And then I'd look at it and I'd read it and I'd look at them and I'd say, the hell it isn't. She's dead on. And they wouldn't admit it because they didn't like what it said. So you have to be willing to accept the analysis of what your root style is. And that's the problem, is people are not willing to adapt. I mean, we say all the time that project management is you have to be adaptable. And so that's one of the cases where if you don't adapt, you won't survive. It's as simple as that. If you lock in on one style, and that's what management does. A lot of our senior managers right now, they'll tell you, well, no, I picked my style already and I'm locked in on it, and that's what I'm going to use. Whether it's right or wrong, whether it's successful or not, that's the style I'm locked in on. And so we push this big time, and all my corporate assignments is flexibility. Understand the environment that you're in, and then you can do it. So that's why it's easy for me to say, no, I'm not an introvert or an extrovert. I'm both.
Yeah, you kind of play one on TV in a sense, and then you develop that ability, that skill. Now, a lot of people out there will say, well, I mean, Lee, you're a good talker, dude. Like, and you're really knowledgeable and you've been around like this. Like, what was it like that day or that week or those things when you made a decision to say, I've got to be more extroverted in appearance and in action? Like, was it scary? Was it herky jerky as you started to get into it? Did you model off people? Like, how did you make that transition?
I'll tell you what, Scott, that's a darn good question. I I got hit with it again in 73 at General Electric. And what got it to my attention was I was teaching this earned value class. We're getting ready for a government demonstration review. And I'm teaching this class. And as I'm looking at my student body, I thought they were all dead. I thought they'd left mentally for sure. And physically, I bet they would have if I'd let them. And that hit me right between the eyes. Well,
Yeah.
obviously what I'm doing ain't working, because what I
Yeah.
was saying was okay. I mean, the basics of what I'm saying is okay, but the way I presented it, the way we talked about it, the way I drew people into discussions, I mean, I was dying on the vine. If you you teach, there's nothing more painful, maybe being a comedian and have nobody laugh, but there's nothing more painful than not getting the reaction from the student body. I just so that's what I picked up on. I mean, I'm not a genius, but I'm smart enough to know that if you're gonna do it, you better do it right.
Right. And if you're out there and like I've been in those spots where, because I mean, I'm the same. I think I'm the same. I am the same way as what you are. Like I am this way on the camera and I'm this way in teaching because it demands it. Like the students demand it, the people demand it. Like that's what they need to be taught that way. But when I go home, I'm like the same way, like exhausted and, by myself, all these things. So like when you went through, I guess some of the things is everybody doesn't have to be Lee. If they go like, okay, I got to be Lee to sell or to explain ideas. Like there's different levels, I would imagine. Like there's different comedians that deliver in different styles, right? Like, so if someone's out there, they just got to maybe they got to find a model that works for them. Maybe Lee's not the guy. Maybe he is the guy. Or maybe there's a different guy that you can start emulating, I would think, possibly. Do you have
I
thoughts
think
on that?
you have to really try some things out.
Yeah.
And one of the disadvantages I had was by 73, hell, I'd only been in the working world 6 or 7 years. I didn't have any stories. I didn't have anything people could relate to. The benefit you have from experience is that you got stories, man, and you got stories of application, you got stories of execution, and you can relate these fundamental concepts to a real world story. And once I started building that rapport, and I used to, because I got old now and started forgetting my stories. I used to have them all written down. I mean, I must have had 100 of them. And that book that I wrote about being a superstar in project management, that's just a book about stories, just about things that happened to me along the way. It's all it is. And hell, I didn't even get close to scratching the surface. And one of the guys that writes management books, he said, we got to really fix this cover up and do this. And I said, no, that wasn't the intent. It wasn't a money maker. It was a storyteller. And once you start to see those stories, and then you go, wow, I can see where you could convert that into a project management application. And so you gotta think. I mean, I learned this when I got married. I got married in 66. Okay. My wife was 3 days out of high school and she wasn't pregnant. And so we got married, okay? And we went on a honeymoon. We went to the first place we were going to go, Yellowstone. That was exciting for us. I mean, I'm 19, she's 17. It's a Yellowstone. So we get to Yellowstone and we pull up and we got a red car with all the white paint, get just married, all that crap on it. So I pull up to check into the Old Faithful Lodge. And as I'm starting to check in, the bell guy, he goes, wait a minute, just wait here a minute. And so he went away for a little while. And he says, okay. He said, we can go ahead and take your stuff in. I said, what's the problem? He said, well, I noticed your car. And he said, the problem is that they had you booked in a bed with 2 twin beds and the bathroom down the hall. And he said, I don't think you'd be willing to do that, would you? And I said, no, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be. So I use that as a story to talk about the change isn't always bad. You can start to relate and everybody in this business has stories.
Sure.
What they need to do is think about how can I present the story in a way that makes sense from a project management perspective. Once you master that, it's not a problem.
And there's a certain gamble in that, in telling that story, because I mean, it's kind of cheeky and fun in the way you're telling it. And like, there's certain insinuations and everything. So you got to play the audience, got to play the situation the right way. But like having those stories, like when I went to sea as a merchant mariner, and when I was a cadet out there, I was 19 or so, and they called me the boy with no stories. And so Because we drank, the union was awesome. We had coffee time twice a day, and you had to go there and drink coffee for 15 minutes. I didn't drink coffee at any time. I didn't even know how to make coffee, but I showed up like the first day, scared to death, these big hulky guys. And they're like, hey, tell us a story, kid. And I was like, I don't have any stories. And they call me the kid with no stories for 3 months. But like getting a story is like the end there. I think it's a genius kind of way to like attach your experience and paint it through. Now, there's one more thing that you said earlier. You showed up, you were interested in what they did. And so you built that rapport through them by just not like, I think, is there a misnomer out there that like, if you're an extrovert or like, I'm going to play this role, that you have to do the talking all the time? Or is it like—
I think there is. And that's not true at all. A lot of my stories are extrapolations of things I was told before the class started by the students.
Yes.
And if you want to start to get student appreciation, use one of their stories as a way to relate things to project management. You don't have to name them by name, just relate one of their stories. And pretty soon everybody's going, wow, that's a great story. And all of a sudden you get to, they listen intently. They come back after lunch. It's unbelievable the way they react to feeling comfortable, feeling like I'm one of the people. I'm not, it's not an instructor-student relationship. I'm one of the people, and they know that, and they can ask questions. And there's no question I tell some edgy stuff. Sometimes it's probably over the edge. My wife is coming up too far with that one. So I don't have her as a buffer anymore, but I try to keep it clean, so to speak, but I also do keep it edgy. So it causes people to think, what do you really mean by that? So I
the other thing is you're making people feel heard, right? Like, you're going out there and if you've reused their story in a nice, respectful way, they're like, wow, Lee listened to me so much that he internalized it. And now he's teaching with it. Like, wow, we're together on this thing now.
Yeah.
And so
I literally interviewed almost every student, every class at one time or another. Usually there were 2-day class, 3-day classes. By the end of the 3 days, I had intentionally, personally spent time with every student.
And this same kind of techniques and approaches, it's just a respectful way to understand, build relationships, connections, can be used. Tell me if I'm right or wrong. When you're running a project, like a lot of people think like, hey, I got to be in this room, I got to be on the spreadsheets and all that stuff. But using the same kind of methodology that you use to build rapport and drive engagement in a class can be used or should be used in regular project life. Is that correct?
Sure. I mean, one of the other things I learned is, hey, this works no matter what environment you're in. So when I was finally put into a management role in, I don't know, like 77 or so, I learned, there's really no reason you can't use the same concept in managing the people that work for you and the projects that are being done within your organization as you do as an instructor. So I would spend, on any given day, I'd spend more than half of the day out talking to people, just gathering information, sharing information. And it backfired on me a little bit because one of my GMs pulled me aside one day and said, what the hell do you do all day? He said, I've been by your office 3 times in the last week and you've never been there once. And I thanked him. I said, thank you. That's because I'm not getting things done. I'm not talking to the people. I'm not building rapport so that when I ask them to work 12 hours tonight, they're not going to even hesitate to say, well, sure, we'll do it for Lee. And so that program I did over in Indianapolis, I know I bring it up a lot, but those guys work 14 hours a day, 7 days a week for 18 months. And a lot of it was to do with the way I handled it.
Yeah. Okay. So to summarize this stuff, I think this is like one of those ones we like scratched into. We were like, wow, this is really, really powerful because a lot of people out there see themselves as, I've got to master all these techniques. I got to push people hard. I got to, budgets and all these different things, but the people side of it. And really it comes back like just for me, reframing what you're saying is you're looking inside to say like, how am I organized and wired? And then whatever you are, you're not just saying, okay, I'm going to stay that way. Like if you want real results, you have to look and say, what is the situation demand? What does the market want? What do the people need? And then you've got to become that. Like, I think, right? Like
in all of our professional development, our staff development work, if you look at appraisals and evaluations and feedback in terms of objectives for next year, they're always focused on the weaknesses. What can I do to improve?
Yeah,
I take a completely different view of that. I want to focus on the strengths so that you become better and better at your strength. Why would I want to convert a piano player into a violin player? No, just learn to play the damn piano. That's what you do, and do it well. And people then begin to focus. I was smart enough to know. Now, as a project manager using information systems, I suck. I mean, I don't know if I could even run a Microsoft project software package. And I got the people to do that because that wasn't my strength. So my strength was using the data to motivate and inspire people to get work done. So you need to be smart enough to realize you're not going to be all things to all people. Pick your strength and then develop it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And then those people that want to be out there and feel like they have an inkling they could do it, that there is a way. It's not a, did you ever feel like you were, how to say the words, like not honest? And I don't mean this in an attacking way, because I've had this situation myself, like that you were one way at home and one way at work. Was it just like a job? Or did you ever have that balance where there's like an inconsistency, like I should be how I am the whole time or anything in your brain?
Well, there's two things I'll tell you. One is when I teach and I'm pretty animated. I get, there's a lot of stuff going on. Okay.
Sure.
But when the class is over, done.
Yeah.
And so my wife she in the early days, she used to come to classes because she liked to meet. She was very much the same as I am. And so I'd get all done with that and we'd be driving home. And if it was a half-hour drive to the hotel, not a word was said. Not a single word was said. And then finally she'd say, I was watching you after the end of the class. There are people coming up to you, and I'm a hugger, so I'm hugging people. People come up to me, and she'd say, why don't I get any of that? And I says, because I'm done at 4:30. It's over. And then you get the real me that you married. And so she put up with it for 54 years. And then the other side of that coin
Which side did she like better, Lee? I'm sorry to interrupt. Which side did she like better?
No, she loved, that's why she came to my classes. My classes were fundamentally a stand-up comedic routine. Okay.
Right.
Just happened to last for 8 hours or 16 hours. And so, and I'd tell stories and people thought, God, he really cares about me. He cares about me. And then so finally on one of the classes, we did an instrument, the strength deployment inventory, I think. We did an instrument that basically said that I wasn't all the things they were seeing. And when that class was over, this is honest to God truth. I had 2 women come up after the class, and they literally had tears in their eyes. They had tears in their eyes. And I thought, oh my gosh, what's the problem? I said, what's the problem? And they said, the problem is we've been with you for 3 days now. And she said, all you've done is lie. You haven't told a single. You made it sound like you cared about us, and all you did was lie. Because I admitted, my wife trained me on it. She said, don't tell them that, because you want them over, and now you're telling them. And so literally, you got to be careful, because
that's very true.
If you do this well, their perception of you becomes all they know. And if they build up a certain image of you and then you spoil it, then you throw water on it, it's a bad situation. Because you see what they said. Here's what they said. You've been lying. You've been lying to us. And I said, I don't see that as a problem. I said, we give Academy Awards to people who can make you think they aren't who they are. So what's the difference? So that's kind of the way I looked at it. I mean, I asked him for Academy Award. So you gotta.
So I think like how to take it back to work and stuff is you just have to be genuine. Like I think earlier conversations about like honest, genuine conversation and caring for people. I don't think at any point, like the language that you're using, like you might say, hey, I'm tricking them and stuff. I know you don't mean that. Like, I know you don't mean you're like trick. Like, I think, like, I be wrong, but like I think at the ultimate point, like my goal and your goal is to get as much knowledge into the student, engage them, light a fire, whatever the goal, like whatever it takes, we'll do it. Like if being mean was the game, all right, mean, I guess. But like, just so happens that engaging and caring and thoughtful and like asking questions seems to work for humans. So yeah, I don't think you were lying. I mean, like, I think you're just giving them everything you got.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I think the additional strength that a person can have is if you're gonna pretend to be something you're not, maybe, is spend some time with the students, because acting one way may turn one student off when
Yeah,
acting
that's very
another
true.
way. So you literally, if I got 50 students, man, I may have to shift hats 15
Yeah,
times during the course
yeah.
of delivery. That people used to say, "Well, who are you when you go home?" And I said, "Well, hell, that's one of the things my wife looks forward to. She never knows who's coming home." And so you have to realize that you can't lock in on a style.
That's very, very true. So you're not locking in on the initial, hey, I'm an introvert. I feel comfortable in that. I'm going to go burrow in my, hole. And you're not going to the other side where I'm wearing this face. Like you're really just starting to like look at someone and say, what do they need? And what's the best approach for them? So you're tailoring your communications. Like, I think that's right. And like the more and more, you're way better than I am. But like when we get in there, you start to realize that you're able to play these different things at almost the same time. Like
Yep.
you're
Yep.
able to like, yeah. And it's an art, just like anything else, like being able to balance a budget.
It looks like on the outside looking in, it looks like multiple personalities. I mean, it really does.
Mhm.
And here's what I've done with it, because I know it works. I've begun to employ the same concept on LinkedIn. So I've
Okay.
got over 30,000 LinkedIn connections,
Mhm.
and wherever I can, and it's very time consuming. I wish I had never started. I communicate with them. I'm communicating with them constantly. Well, I get comments all the time. "Oh, thank you for your contribution to the profession. It's wonderful." I mean, just on and on and on. So it's working. It works.
Mhm.
I mean, I can do it anywhere. And LinkedIn,
Yeah.
it's working. People appreciate the honesty and the candor when you're communicating with them. So, I mean, one guy I'll communicate. I mean, it just depends. It
Mhm.
depends. And if I don't know them, like I talked to a lady today for about 45 minutes, and pretty much all she did was bitch about the government. She worked for the government, and she just disgusted with them. She's been with them 32 years, and so that was a situation where I just listened. I mean,
Mhm.
that's all. She was just wanting somebody to listen. And so I
Yeah.
listened to her, and we ended up in a very warm place. And I don't think I said more than 10 words. But
He
so you
probably
got to
just
read the
said like,
people.
"Oh,
You got to
Lee's so
know.
engaging." Yeah. He
Yeah, you got to
said,
know.
yeah. And the thing is, like, you've been I get a vulnerability. Like in everything you're talking about, you're not scared. You're sharing. You said, "Hey, I'm a hugger." You were talking about, the ways you messed up. And so what role do you think like being not weak but vulnerable and open in your in communication plays in creating connections with people you work with, or you're teaching or whatever?
Well, it's a big role, but nowadays, because of all the Me Too movements and all the sexuality issues that are going on, I would probably be more cautious. When I
I
first
didn't mean
started out, I
necessarily
mean,
like
hell, I
the hug, yes,
yeah, I
obviously,
was
but
hugging everybody. I mean, that's just what I did. That's what I do.
right.
And now, if I were out there, you know what I did towards the end of my teaching stuff was I
Mhm.
got to where I would ask them, "Do you mind if I hug you?" No, if they said no, then we're good. I've had people say no, don't invade my space. I don't want to
Right.
be.
Oh,
But so you have to do what's morally and in some case politically
yeah,
acceptable. I mean, why would
sure.
you shoot yourself in the foot if you know if I hug this there's certain people that if
CEO
you hug
or
them, you're
whomever,
in
yeah, you
trouble.
got to play the right
Yeah,
market.
they're
Yeah,
gonna nail you.
yeah,
And there's other people when you hug them, they send you gifts at Christmas. So it's just a matter of sort of interpreting what's the issue. My wife, I'm telling you, I don't know if I'm going to survive without her because she was my best counsel. She warned me about this all the time because she knows. She knows I'm a hugger, and she warned me. She said, you're gonna get in trouble." I haven't yet, but it
yeah.
could happen.
Well, yeah, I understand 100%. And like knowing who you're talking to and knowing who
Yeah.
you're the room you're playing in. And then also like from the vulnerability standpoint, like you're very open. Like I think the open communication to say, "Hey, this is what we're doing. Here's what we're trying to achieve." Like you're creating a just clarity in like who you are, what you're trying to do. You're not creating a facade. And I think like it creates like some leeway in a sense. They say, "Hey, I know who Lee is. He's being honest. He's being himself. Like I can work with that, even if you're being a little bit more outwardly going,
Yeah, no,
extroverted."
I think that's right. The vulnerability is a good term. I mean, if they understand that you'll be able to take comments, you'll take criticism and not be
Mhm.
offended by it and that kind of thing. I think that makes a big difference. I mean, I, just looking at this program we're doing with PMI that you're involved in and a bunch of other people are involved in, I helped organize that group. And I will tell you, well, you know, because you've been participating, that is a group of extremely diverse personalities.
Very much so.
I think we're doing a pretty good job of pulling it all together. But I'm telling you, if I hadn't been trained like I've been trained in the years preceding, there's some of those personalities that I'd probably have a hard time engaging. But right now, I just realized, hey, everybody's different.
Yeah.
Everybody's different, and they respect the way that they're treated. I think people need to understand that the respect issue is huge.
Giant. And the other thing,
I may not agree with what you say, but I respect your right to say it.
Absolutely, 100% agree. And I think that's a good way to end this all. And like with that group, there are some people that push a little harder. Some people are like sit back, and like you're right, like the respectfulness of the entire organization and group, little team, is obviously there, and you know, all working together. So, like, let's just finish it off here. I know you've talked a lot about individuals. So if someone's listened to this long and they're that person they know they want to make a difference, they know they want to get out there and they want to be like a more impactful project leader, or maybe they want to coach and teach, who knows, which project management leading projects is that in a sense. What are some of those first things to get out of their shell and go start being that person that they need to be? What are some of those first things that they should do?
Well, I think right now the big support process that's being talked about a lot is Toastmasters.
Okay.
If you want to polish your presentation skills, I think this is so important. I endorse them big time. I never took Toastmasters, but I endorse them big time because you see, my position has always been, if you're going to be a project manager, you're going to be making project presentations.
Yes.
And there's nothing worse than a project manager who has great information and doesn't know how to get it out there. And
Very
so
true.
I think that's a good start. You can self-teach. I don't think I took any classes like this, but I read a lot. That's the other thing I do, is read a lot about I read all the self-help books. I've read all that stuff to get tips about how can I improve in that area. And that's what you have to do. Now, the next step, of course, is looking for an opportunity, volunteering for an opportunity to take a risk. When I volunteered to teach earned value, I didn't know jack squat about earned value. And you got to be willing to take that risk and step up and know that you can do it, step up and deliver. You can't just sit back and say, I wish I had a chance to. You got to make your own. No, I got to tell you, there's nobody in your organization that's worried about you.
That's very true.
If you want to make it, you got to make it on your own.
Yep. And then once you get in there, to finish off, like I think the thing that you say, like once you start taking those chances, you've got to be really honest about that feedback. Like, is what I'm doing working? Because if you bullheadedly go into it, you're going to inevitably make a lot of mistakes, which is.
Well, let me close out with one story here.
Yes, sir.
When I got my management position at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, I started my group, and it came time to do evaluations. Everybody does them just for the appearance that you're actually doing them. They do them, and so I said, we're going to do something a little bit new. We're going to do a normal appraisal process, but in addition to that, I want you to evaluate my performance as a manager. And I said, I want you to be candid and honest with me. So I said, this is my opportunity to see, where I'm falling short of expectations. And so they did that. They started coming in. I had about 11 or 12 people. They came in, and I'm reading them, and I'm going, damn, I'm even better than I thought I was. Unbelievable. So I sent them back to them, and I said, okay, but this time, could you tell me the truth?
Okay.
And I've said this 1,000 times. That feedback from that group changed my life forever in terms of a manager, because I thought I was really good, and I found out I wasn't really good at all. I had all kinds of things I needed to work on, and if I hadn't asked and been willing to accept the input, I'd probably still be making the same damn mistakes now. So you got to be willing. If you're going to ask how I do, you better be ready for the answer. And then nobody's criticizing you. They're trying to give you positive feedback that you can grow from.
I love it. That is a good way to end, Lee. That is really, really good. So that is awesome. This was a fun one to talk about communication. I think people out there should take his advice, Lee's advice, go out there and follow those three steps and go hit it. And then next week we'll go deeper into like the people side of it, maybe into the selling side, kind of how do we make the case. And you mentioned something about presentations. I think that's a fun one to go into and see how they can mess this thing up presentation wise and how they can actually turn themselves into someone.
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
good idea. That'd be a good topic.
All right, Lee. Well, I really, really appreciate it. And I will talk to you next week. Thank you, sir.
Thanks much, Scott. Take care.
Anytime. Thank you.